Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Robertson Jr. Welcome back to the Hallowed Horror Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Jason Collins.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2, second episode. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm excited. I'm actually really excited to talk about this film tonight because I'm a big Stephen King fan. So tonight's movie, I'm going to have fun talking about it for sure.
Yeah, I think anybody in the that loves horror has to have some sort of respect for Stephen King. So I'm excited about tonight's movie as well.
And what is tonight's movie?
Tonight's movie is Dr. Sleep.
That's right. Dr. Sleep came out November last year, so it's a few months old, and it actually had a really short-lived theatrical life, which I want to talk about probably here in the beginning because I have some thoughts on that, especially kind of piggybacking off of our episode we did on the Blair Witch Project last week. But this was a novel that came out in 2013, and the movie, of course, came out in 2019, and it was the sequel to The Shining, which the original book came out in 1977, and the infamous Stanley Kubrick film came out in 1980, which we can talk a little bit about that as well. But it's been a long time since The Shining, the book or the movie, to now have the sequel, hitting theaters and the book a few years ago. It's a big gap, and I was really excited as a Stephen King fan to jump back into the book and was excited for the movie as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this movie from Mike Flanagan was, like you mentioned, it was made as a sequel to Kubrick's movie adaptation of The Shining, rather than it being a sequel to King's version of the book. Now, I think most people know, King was not a huge fan of Kubrick's adaptation,
No.
but this was, the having taken the reins and doing a sequel to the movie was largely due to the masses being more familiar with Kubrick's version and mainly preferring it too. But that's how it was pitched to King, and I think in the process, Flanagan created this really beautiful blend of all three stories, that being both the original books from King and Kubrick's adaptation. And me and Michael talked about this a little bit before, and I have to agree with Michael when he said that he found that Flanagan's story was more entertaining, because I don't think you need to take sides with it. I mean, there was not much compromise. It had some of the best parts from all the different stories. And, as we'll mention, we got to go back to the Overlook one last time. And that was probably everyone's favorite part.
For sure. Yeah. You said it perfectly, in my opinion. Flanagan really took a risk here. And if there's some really fantastic, I bought this movie on iTunes, so I was able to watch, the theatrical version and the director's cut, which we'll talk about a little later. And then also there's some really interesting short interviews with Flanagan and Stephen King, sitting side by side discussing this product that is basically the amalgamation of King's written word, Kubrick's version, and Mike Flanagan's own screenplay, where he took these things and meshed them together and created this really, really awesome film. I was a huge fan of the book, The Shining. I liked Dr. Sleep okay. It's not my favorite King book, but it was obviously very well written, very entertaining. It had the nostalgia factor, going back with Dan Torrance and that storyline. But the way that, not Kubrick, but the way that Flanagan really handled this ending, I thought was just really, really, really exciting. And King admits in some of these interviews that were part of these kind of behind the scenes that he thought Flanagan did a really good job. He respected all the stories and made this special thing that was just kind of honoring each of them and not dismissing any one of them. And you're right, Stephen King has gone on record several times saying he thought that the Kubrick film was cold. I've heard him say that. He actually uses the word chilly in these behind-the-scenes interviews, where he felt like you never really sympathized or empathized with Jack Torrance at all in the Kubrick's film, whereas in the book, he really was a guy that was trying to do right and struggling and ultimately succumbed to the overlook. Whereas in the movie, the moment you see Jack Nicholson, you just go, that guy's crazy. Like, he's already lost it.
And for sure. And you mentioned in the director's cut, I too bought I bought it on iTunes. And so I was, I have the director's cut, but for some reason I couldn't get it to play. But you mentioned in the bar scene, there was a cut right after that in the director's cut in the bathroom.
Yep.
Where you get to see Jack be vulnerable and him try to be a father again. And that's not a part of Jack you ever saw in The Shining.
Correct. Yep. And I definitely want to touch on that when we get to the end of the movie in tonight's episode and talk about the director's cut a little bit more. But let's go ahead and just quickly recap. Again, we're talking about Dr. Sleep, and this was from writer and director Mike Flanagan. If you don't know Mike Flanagan's work by this point, you definitely should go check him out. He has probably come to fame most recently because he was writer-director for The Haunting of Hill House, which was on Netflix, came out, was it 2 years ago now, I think? Coming up on 2 years?
It was 2018. It was 2018, 2019 during the filming. So yeah, it came out last year. Okay. Or did it come out?
I think it came out in 2018.
It did, yeah.
Fantastic series on Netflix. Any fan of horror, definitely go check that out. It's a beautifully shot, edited, just amazing series. And he also brought along his cinematographer, director of photography from that series, Michael Fiminari, comes on board with him for Dr. Sleep as well. He was also, Flanagan and Fiminari did Gerald's Game, which is, of course, another adaptation of a Stephen King book that was also on Netflix that I also very much enjoyed. And that's kind of a lesser popular Stephen King book. But again, I thought they did a fantastic job with that. And this movie does star Ewan McGregor as Dan Torrance, all grown up, Rebecca Ferguson, who absolutely killed it as Rose the Hat, and newcomer Kylie, I don't know if it's Curran, who plays Abra Stone. So that's what we're talking about. And Jason, you did listen to Dr. Sleep on audiobook when it came out. Is that right?
I did. It was right when it came out, so it's been a while. And I did listen to that book, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book. It was very, very good.
For those of you that don't know, and I don't know why you would at this point, but of the two of us, I am definitely the heavy reader. I'm a writer, so obviously I have to read a lot as well. Jason enjoys good stories, but tends to consume them in audio. Not much of a sit in the corner and read quietly kind of guy he is. I'm not built for it. I've got to be moving. I got to be doing something. I'm a much more visual kind of guy. And, I've tried hard, but I just can't force myself to sit down and read. I don't know why. And most of my audiobooks are consumed, as you put it, in the car as I'm driving. So that's when I do all of my listening / reading. I'm not criticizing. Listening to audiobooks is the same as reading, in my opinion. I do not put down those that listen to audiobooks. I think they're fantastic. Don't let anybody tell you differently. Just because you don't hold the book or the Kindle doesn't mean you're not reading when you're listening to an audiobook. I cannot listen. I like audiobooks. I have two problems with them. The first one is I feel like they slow me down. I read so much faster than I can listen to an audiobook. And the second one is kind of like what you were saying about having to be in the car. I can't listen to an audiobook if I'm doing anything that really requires my focus and there's distractions around me. I can kind of zone out in a car and drive and listen. But if I'm on the treadmill or if I'm walking the dog, or I drift, my mind wanders and I can't focus on the story. It's weird. We're digressing. Audiobooks are good.
I want to touch on a point. You said it's too slow. Now, there is a way in Audible that you can speed up the reading. You can do it at like 1 1/4, 1.5, 2, even faster than that if you want to. And I normally listen to 1 1/4. That's about as fast as I can listen to it and also ingest it. Like 1.5 is doable, but there's like some moments where I'm like, oh, I missed it. I don't know how far back to go to catch up. And then like 2 is just impossible. I don't know how people listen to anything on times 2.
Right.
Yeah.
So, anyway, let's go back to the movie now that we've gone off on our tangent. Let's talk about the thing I was mentioning about this movie's short-lived theatrical life.
Mm-hmm.
I was absolutely shocked after I saw this movie. After I did not go see it in the theater. I'm not a huge fan of going to see horror movies in the theater, frankly, because I just hate the people that are around me always being distractions. I hate the whispering. I hate the sound of you chewing your popcorn behind me. I don't like the cell phones. Let's be honest,
Michael, you're not a huge fan of crowds and people in general either. So
it's not wrong. You're not wrong. But the thing with horror is a very intimate genre. There is so much about the horror genre, especially when you're watching it on the screen, that is relying on atmosphere and sound and the mood that it's building. And I hate the distractions around me when I'm in a theater trying to watch a horror film. I go to see very few horror films in the theater, unless they're the bigger blockbusters that I think are going to be fun, that don't require me to really sit there in my basement and really kind of get immersed in it. Or if it's something hot that I want to see because I don't want to hear the spoilers and, miss out on something. Anyway, I did not get to go see this in the theater because where I live in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, it was only in the theater for 2 weeks here in town. 2 weeks, because I checked on the third week because I was actually contemplating going to see it one weekend when I didn't have anything else going on, and it was gone. And then I started seeing the articles online about how this movie was flopping in the theater. It was like the big Stephen King flop after the success we've already had, with It Chapter 1, It Chapter 2, these things that have been blowing up. I was amazed that it flopped after I saw it on iTunes because I thought it was such a well-made film. Mike Flanagan's credit that he'd already built up with Haunting of Hill House, I couldn't believe more people weren't interested because of that. I think the biggest flaw about the way this movie was marketed was there was not enough emphasis on the fact that this was the sequel to The Shining. Mm-hmm. They mentioned it in some of the flashes in the trailer. It was on the poster, I think, but it wasn't like huge. And I think the problem is you say The Shining, the entire world reacts in a certain way. You say Dr. Sleep, if you're not a Stephen King fan, you don't know what it is. If somebody hasn't told you what this title means, you have no idea. Because at the surface, it's a boring title. Dr. Sleep. Doctors, people don't like them. Sleep, it's boring. Mm-hmm. I think the marketing department missed something here. Not that I'm a marketer. I have no idea what they could have done differently, except maybe put the emphasis on The Shining a little more.
I think they gave too much credit to their audience and to just know what it was. They really did not do much marketing. They did not push hard enough for new eyes to come see this movie. So I agree with you on that.
Yep. It's a shame because it is, I think, a really good film, which we should now probably start discussing. So I saw it a couple months ago. I just rewatched it this week before we did the record this episode. You watched it for the first time this week. Let's start with you. What do you think about the way that the movie started?
Well, how did it start? I'm having to think really hard now how it started immediately.
We're at the Overlook.
Okay, yeah, it was the opening up with little Danny on his big wheel, right?
Yep.
It made me smile. I smiled really big as soon as we were back in the Overlook immediately, seeing him run through or ride through the hallways. Mm-hmm. Of course, he stopped right at 237, and I loved how you couldn't see in the room when it opened up. It was completely dark. I think it opened up great. From the way that this movie was shot. I mean, it was an homage to, the original, The Shining, and so opening up right in the Overlook, I think just puts you right back into that mindset, and it reminded you of really the terror that Danny went through, and now we're seeing the result of it because we dropped right into, like, after that, it shows them at the hotel. Then it shows them in Florida, and he's still traumatized from there, which is where his demons have come to. They're still after him there, and then Dick shows him how to deal with it and handle it, but he's never right. The rest of his life, he's pretty much handling his own demons in that way, but he never really takes care of anything. And then it throws us right into his adulthood, where he is a very damaged human being.
Right. And that, I think the beginning of this movie, it took me by surprise, actually, because, we had already seen, so having read the book, if you read The Shining, the original, the novel, you know that the Overlook blows up in the end, right? There's the boiler, it explodes, there's fire at the end. The Kubrick film didn't do that. It ends in ice. Jack Torrance freezes to death outside, and it's over. The hotel is still standing. So when we saw the trailer for Dr. Sleep, when they first released the trailer, before the movie came out in the theaters, the fact that we saw adult Dan Torrance walking through the Overlook, that was like the big surprise of the trailer. That was when you knew, okay, so Flanagan's looking at the movie more so than he is the novel. Mm-hmm. So I got really excited because I was kind of wondering, is it still standing, or is this kind of like a mental flashback that he's reliving some sort of nightmare? I didn't know. I didn't expect us to be right into the Overlook when the movie started. I figured that was going to be a payoff later. It was going to be something they were going to tease in the trailer, and you weren't going to get it till the end in some sort of climax.
And they hit it hard too with that long crossfade of the carpet, because it crossfades right into that design, and then you're right there behind Danny riding on his big wheel. No, you're not. There is no intro. Like you're just right in it.
Yeah, it was amazing. They just grab you. I've talked about this before. With writing, if you don't grab a reader in the first chapter, you have a good chance of losing a lot of readers if they're just reading maybe the sample of your book on the Kindle store, or they pick up your book at Costco while they're grocery shopping and they read a few pages. If you don't grab them, you lose them. I think Flanagan grabbed every Stephen King fan and every fan of the movie The Shining right in those opening few minutes. And
yeah, absolutely.
And he did a great job of capturing, so many years of Danny's life right in the beginning. You see him at the Overlook, the nightmare there. Then you see him and Wendy, having survived in Florida. You see the lesson he learned with Dick, like you said, which again is different because, Dick dies in the film. He doesn't die in the movie. I'm sorry, in the book. So again, Flanagan handled that really well. He was able to take some of the scenes from the book where Dick is still alive and still put them in the movie, just creating this whole idea that people that shine have this ability to go on and to communicate with each other after the fact, which I thought was genius.
Well, and it was such a huge part of the film because Dick is really who guided him and showed him how to take care of these demons that he had, with the box, with the gift. I don't know how else you would have played that without just completely rewriting a whole part of his his lessons and his teaching that Dick really guided him through when he was a small child.
Yeah, exactly. It was a pretty ingenious way that Flanagan handled that, and I think again, just one example of how he was able to do such justice to, both pieces of source material, the written novel, and then of course going back to Kubrick's film. Really, really impressive there. And right from the beginning, by the way, this movie is scary. This movie is terror inducing. Like you said, just the idea of being back in the Overlook and hearing some of these musical notes, it brings back that fear. You see the woman in the bathtub, again, tormenting Danny in Florida in his mom and his apartment's, bathroom. She's obviously hideous as always and terrifying.
I thought it was jarring to see her in a different bathroom.
Right. Yeah. And that was. And
what is this woman's obsession with the bathtub?
That's where she died. Going on to continuing with the theme of being scary. Once we get into adult Dan's life and we see how far he has fallen and we see just the shambles that his life has become.
We saw his rock bottom.
Right. I remember reading the scene in the book where he has the one night stand with the chick who basically overdoses and and he wakes up in her apartment and she has the baby there. How gut wrenching is that scene? Just to imagine yourself in there and the fact that he almost just doesn't seem to care, taking the money and leaving. Like he is, like you said, rock bottom. He can go no lower. And it's, even though he has realized that, he still takes the money and runs, which,
I don't think he quite realized how rock bottom he had hit until his shine allowed him to see the ghost of her and her son. Just a few moments later in the movie, after he had ran.
Right. He gets to Fraser,
mm-hmm.
and then he spends the night at the new place that his friend helps him get, and then he has that
mm-hmm.
nightmare, and that's when he basically goes to the AA meeting. Yeah. So that dream
right.
sequence where he's got the corpse of the woman and the baby, that thing.
The baby got me. The baby got me hard. It hit me in a way that I was not expecting.
Yeah, and
visually, oh my gosh.
And in horror, even in horror to this day, dealing with children, especially young children, babies, infants, it's still kind of taboo. It's not something that you see a lot of, because it is just so raw and it is so wrong. So I was actually really happy that Flanagan included that in the movie. I'm glad they didn't pull punches and they really put that in your face. Seeing the corpse of a dead, toddler is never easy, but it just really went to sell how far he had fallen.
Yeah. And it sells his, it aids into understanding his journey as well.
Right. Exactly. So he hits rock bottom. Dan Torrance is an alcoholic, just like his father. He's got, alcoholic rage, just like his father. Yeah, you see that with the bar scene where he's basically beating the guy unconscious with the billiards ball.
Mm-hmm.
It's as low as you can get. And so he finally kind of wakes up a little bit and decides he's got to go. He buys a bus ticket. He heads north, and he ends up in Fraser, New Hampshire. Gets off, and basically this is where everything else takes place. This is where we see his journey going from rock bottom to sober, do good civilian. And then we also start getting introduced to the other shining main character that can shine, I should say, and Abra, who's a fantastic character. All the while, by the way, I think we forgot something in the beginning here. After the Overlook section, we forgot the introduction of Rose the Hat, the main villain.
We've got the introduction to that entire tribe. Yeah, it was actually in the same time as we were seeing Danny and Wendy in Florida. It was the same time period, and we are introduced to Rose the Hat very personally right there as she I don't know how else to put it. They're hunting these kids. Mm-hmm. They're hunting these children. So she lures this little girl to a lakeside. Tell me what, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I know you've had to have seen clips from it. What did that scene remind you of? Like a classic horror movie?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure I know.
Frankenstein. When he kills that little girl.
Interesting.
By the pond.
Interesting. Yep.
As soon as I saw it, I was like, man, this setup is exactly the same.
I wasn't even going back that far. You're right. By the way, that little girl was the same little actress who was in Haunting a Hill House. She was one of the children.
Well, Mike Flanagan does that a lot. He brings in a ton of his characters.
Yeah, there's several in this movie. So yeah, so we get to, right after the introduction with the Overlook, we get to meet Rose the Hat, who, is such an interesting villain because of the fact that she seems so happy on the outside and so like loving and caring. She's almost like a hippie,
and very charismatic too,
and beautiful. Like she's just this gorgeous woman. Rebecca Ferguson is so good in this role. I mean, she is so good of balancing that syrupy sweetness, and then she's also going to go murder children like at the flip of a switch. It's really, really good. So yeah, we're getting introduced to this tribe of hunters of children who can shine, for lack of a better word or phrase, I guess, and they are called the True Knot.
Yes, and they are an ancient people. I mean, they are from millennia back. At least the one guy that we know of.
Right.
But they have figured out a way to live off the steam of the children that have the shine.
Right.
So
and the way they extract the steam is by basically torturing and killing them.
Because fear and pain purify the steam.
That sounded like a commercial. It's very scary. Yes. So again, pretty horrific subject matter. You've got a tribe of people hunting children. So, yeah, it's scary stuff. And you had mentioned to me in our conversation that we had earlier before we started recording this that you were kind of bummed that we didn't get to learn a little bit more about the True Knot. And it's been I read this novel like I do every Stephen King novel. Basically, the day it comes out, I have it in my hands. I'm reading it. So it's been a little too long since I read it to really remember how much detail the book went into of the True Knot. But there is one thing that I think kind of shows that maybe the movie didn't go into as much detail as the book, is that if you look at the cast, all these characters have names. Like obviously we have Rose the Hat, we have Snakebite Andy, we have the Crow, we have was it Billy the Chunk or something like that?
I can't remember.
Yeah, which by the way, it's not Chunk in the book; it's something else, a little more racist. We have all these characters have names, but we don't actually get to really meet any of them except those ones that I just listed. So the fact that they had a name that had some sort of nickname and some sort of meaning behind it makes me think that the book did go into more detail about more of them.
I'm fairly certain it did. There was a lot of things that I remember at the end of the story, thinking that, well, I didn't see this person do this thing, and it had to do with the True Knot and their characters. Like you said, I mean, we only really were introduced formally or properly to 3 of them, but there was probably 8 or 9 of them.
Mm-hmm. There was several,
that were in that tribe.
Yeah, and there was Grandpa Flick, the oldest guy.
Flick.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so he basically was the ancient one. And as he's dying, Rose goes on to talk about all the centuries he's lived through and all the things he has seen and done. So just implying that yes, they are living off the steam of these children that can shine. They've basically almost died and be reborn to a certain degree. Well,
they're not immortal. They're quasi-immortal. They age much slower than a regular person. But it also has to do with the amount and the quality of the steam that they're getting, and it also does not have to be kids. It's just better quality steam from children.
Right. Exactly.
Man, there was one jarring scene that it was like this. These are not people anymore. They're just wild animals. And when Grandpa Flick finally died and he turned into steam, it's like everybody they mourned for maybe 2 seconds, and then they went right down into this pile of steam and started sucking him in. God, that was such a good scene.
Yeah, you're right. Animals. That's a good way to describe it. They had very animalistic tendencies when they were hungry, when they were hunting. And I was looking through some of the IMDb trivia, and I think they might have actually they mentioned this in some of the behind the scenes interviews as well. I don't know what the official word for this person is, but they had a
movement coach.
Yes, they had a movement coach that came in and taught them, and they were basically trying to move like insects, which in retrospect, looking at the film again, I can see some of that. It's really interesting stuff. But yes, so the True Knot, they're out there. They're hunting children that can shine to get the steam and basically live forever. They're vampires to a certain degree. That's really probably the best way to define them. So we've met them. We've met little Danny. We have met adult Dan, who is now moving on to Fraser, New Hampshire to get his life together. And then we meet Abra. Now, this is the newcomer to this story in terms of Dan's life. Another kid who can shine. And I will say this right off the bat about Abra. I loved her confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So we meet her for the first time in the theatrical version. We meet her at her 5th or 6th birthday party. She's really young.
She's still young.
Yep. And she's already got a little bit of a swagger to her, talking to the magician who's there at her birthday party. So I can do that. I can do magic. And she's got these little tricks that she can do. And then as she gets older and she starts communicating with Dan and they meet, and of course everything that happens after, she's just got a swagger, man. She has got a confidence. And I love that because even the kids that were in it when they were younger, even in King's new book, The Institute, which deals a lot with kids, and Stand By Me, which was based on The Body, the novella The Body. Like these kids, they all have fear in them still. They all have their insecurities still, which is very normal for children. But Aber really didn't have much of that. She was just gung-ho, so confident in everything she was doing, from tracking down the baseball boy that gets killed to the confrontations that she has with the True Knot later. Like it's almost like she has fun doing it.
And she is, and let's let everybody know. I mean, she shines very bright. I mean, she is the most powerful of their kind. Do we have a name for them? I'm not even sure what they're called.
Who are we talking about? The people that can shine?
People that can shine, right.
Yeah,
I know everybody has a little shine.
Right.
Some people have a lot more.
Yeah.
She had a lot.
She had a lot. And
she was very
Yes, exactly. That confidence and that bravery. Yes, that's another good word for it. She was just all like, she was unstoppable. You were not going to slow her down. And in fact, Dan tries to slow her down a couple times, and she's not having it. So it was really cool. She's a good character. Where do you want to go from here? So we've met basically all of our main players now, and the movie for a little while really focuses on adult Dan, getting his sobriety, and then also becoming the orderly at the the retirement home.
Well, we got to talk about where he gets his name from. Yeah,
right.
At the hospice.
Yep, Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, exactly. At the hospice, he is able to use his shine to ease the patients that are, on their way out. He's able to use his shine to make that transition easier for them.
I think those are some of the most emotional scenes of the movie, by the way. There's 2 scenes that we see him help these people, and I swear in the first one, I get a little misty-eyed when I've watched it both times. Like it's a very beautifully written scene, and it's very somber. It's emotional. You see that Dan Torrance is a really good guy once he can get his demons under control.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that he wants to use because he hasn't used his shine in years. He kind of put that away. He goes over that, at one point near the end of the movie, but one of the last times he used his shine was, right after or right before his mother died. Which was, he was what, 20 or 21 when that happened. Mm-hmm. So he uses his shine to make the transition easier for these hospice patients. And that's a beautiful thing. He, the one thing that I wish the movie had gone more into, but I understand that you have a runtime, you have to pay attention to what you're doing, and maybe it didn't fit in the story, but in the book, the hospital was a huge part in his life. He spent a lot of time there, and it aided in his recovery in so many ways, and they just didn't go over that very much. And I like we already said, it goes over, how he got his name, Dr. Sleep, the very first patient. He was trying to go get a doctor, and he was saying, no, you're exactly where you need to be. I need you here. And he started to use his shine, and that's when the guy called him, yeah, you're Dr. Sleep. Of course, he died right after that, so I'm not sure how that name started to circulate, unless either the cat or Danny himself told, I'm Dr. Sleep now, guys. Okay, so yeah. I'm here to help you.
Also kind of interesting that the title of the book and subsequently the film, really didn't have a lot to do with the overall plot of the story. I mean, it was kind of just a very small bit of who Dan was, but it was such a large part of his transition to being the guy he needed to be to then go help Abra and defeat the True Knot. So,
and what always threw me off too was I remember in The Shining, Dick always called him Doc in The Shining, but it was a completely different reason. It was because of like Bugs Bunny cartoon. So it always threw me off. Like, why is he being called Doc as a kid, and now he's being called Dr. Sleep as in this story? But the two are completely unrelated. I'm sticking with that, and that makes me feel better.
Yeah, Dick called him Doc because he knew that his parents called him Doc. The parents were the ones that nicknamed him Doc because of. You're right. I think it was the Bugs Bunny, but yeah, Dick was able to ascertain that because of his shine.
Right. Gotcha.
So that's how he reached out to Danny in the beginning of the Shining. So yeah. So the Dr. Sleep section, Dan is basically between doing the hospice work and then Billy is the name of his friend, the guy that he meets when he gets off the bus.
Sponsor. Yep.
He goes to Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes, and we fast forward quite a bit. We go through
8 years.
Yes, 8 years we jump, and in that time, Dan has managed to get his life together. He's he's doing well. He's happy. He's I think as happy as he's going to be, and everybody likes him, and he's living the life that he wants to live. He's got a couple friends. He's got a good job, and Abra has also grown up, and in doing so, her shine has gotten stronger, and because of her shine being so strong, she is able to feel the baseball boy's demise. That is really
more than that.
That's really where the connection starts with the whole, I guess, build up to the climax and creating the conflict of this whole story. Is that the True Knot didn't even know she was there. She was just so strong that she actually found them, and subsequently they got turned on to her. So the baseball boy, again, another child murder, and that is one gruesome scene. So the True Knot, they're hungry, they're looking for food. Apparently the supply of children that shine is dwindling. They're having a hard time finding more of them. They managed to find this young boy who's a baseball player, who, by the way, is played by Jacob Tremblay, who is a fantastic actor. If you haven't seen The Room, or if it's just Room, I can't remember. He's in that. He was in that comedy, was it Good Boys, that came out, I think, a year or so ago. He's kind of like the up-and-coming young actor.
Well, he was also, I don't know if you remember this, I never saw this movie, but he starred in another Mike Flanagan movie called Before I Awake.
Oh, no, I did not see that. You're right. I think you're absolutely right. I never saw that one. He's fantastic.
He's amazing.
They, unfortunately, are able to, using Snakebite Andy's powers of persuasion.
Pushing ability.
Yes, good job. Powers of persuasion. I made that way more complicated than it needed to be.
Pushing is basically she can push. I guess it's pushing her feelings. She can push like a feeling to the person that she wants. She'll say, it's sort of like a Jedi trick,
Yeah, she's basically commanding
we are your friends,
them.
and you want to get into the van with us.
Yeah, exactly. They abduct him and they murder him in a very gruesome scene that we don't need to go into tons of detail on, except for the fact that again,
they didn't shy away.
No, they
just
didn't.
Like you said, they didn't shy away from the baby ghost corpse. They did not shy away from this scene either. So much to the fact that a behind the scenes clip that they talk about, the very first take that they do with him, he is so good at playing this traumatized child that's being murdered. I mean, the adults all around him, like they were stunned. They were traumatized for him. And so after the scene cut, he hopped up and walked off, and they were just like, I don't understand what just happened.
Right.
And he was like, look, he did a good job. It was a great scene. This is Mike Flanagan talking. He said, but we're going to have to do it again because you all have to be happy about this.
Right.
You
Yeah.
can't all look so scared.
Right. Yeah. It's a phenomenal scene. It's hard to watch to a certain degree, but yeah, he did a fantastic job. But they murder him. They use his steam for food, obviously, and they're replenishing themselves. And Abra basically gets the feeling and is aware that this is happening because of the, not to use to use a Star Wars reference, the disturbance in the Force, so to speak. Mm-hmm. She feels this.
It's so much more than a feeling with her. She actually is able to put herself into she puts herself there and she can see it happening.
Right.
And because Rose the Hat's power is so strong, she was able to sense Abra watching.
Right. And she
that's
realizes
when they got onto her scent.
Yep. They realize how strong she is, how strong she could possibly be. And there's a few instances of this. This sets off a series of events. It kicks off Abra trying harder to communicate with Dan because they have been playing this kind of weird pen pal game on this blackboard wall in Dan's apartment where they're aware of each other, but neither one of them really think much of each other in terms of what the purpose is. It's just like, hey, somebody else that can shine. This is kind of fun. We'll say hi to each other every once in a while.
Like you said, they're pen pals.
Yeah, exactly. It kicks off her trying to reach out to him for a greater purpose because now she thinks they need to go help and need to go do something about what happened. And he's the only person she really knows who to turn to because he is like her. The second thing this does is it creates this cat and mouse game between Abra and Rose the Hat. And we have a series of events where they're basically jumping back and forth kind of into each other's minds, setting traps for each other's, shine to look into each other's lives and try to track each other down. And there's some really interesting camera angles here and some really interesting visual effects that play into these scenes with these kind of like meshed realities, combining together. The supermarket scene, the scene in Abra's bedroom where, Rose basically appears and thinks that she is peering into Abra where it's really a trap. These are all really, really fun set pieces to play with.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun. And what I thought was interesting, and you mentioned them, both Abra and Dan being able to play with each other, being able to communicate with each other so freely. It really speaks to how strong Dan really is with his shine as well. And that is played upon later. You don't really realize how strong he is. It's never really presented in a way that, he's very powerful. In The Shining, it doesn't happen. And really in this movie, up until the very end, it doesn't happen.
Right.
But he is also quite powerful with his shine.
In The Shining, I think it's Dick that kind of mentions to Danny, that he's the strongest, shine he's ever seen. I think there's a moment where he tries to he tries to encourage Dan to reach out and try to talk to him in his mind, and he's like, it kind of knocks him back. It's so loud and forceful. So you get kind of glimpses of that. And then there's a scene at the end of this movie where Rose, sees Dan and she can feel his strength or whatever. He does something and she goes, "How did we miss you?" Because he is so powerful. But he's so casual about it. It's like having a gift that he obviously doesn't want. It's just a byproduct of who he is. And there's something about that casualness of his shine that makes it so cool when he actually uses it.
Yeah,
it's pretty
especially neat. I think the most powerful scene was, as we progress through this story, Abra is eventually caught. And we'll backtrack just a little bit because there is one scene I want to talk about, but Abra is eventually caught. And one of the most powerful things I've seen outside of maybe when we were at the Overlook and he's able to suck her into his world again, into his mind box, Rose the Hat, that is when he encompasses Abra's body. Like he takes over her body, which was just, I mean, it was even like the guy, what was his name? The driver?
The Crow.
At the time. Was it the Crow?
Yeah.
It was the Crow, wasn't it? Yeah. Even the Crow was like, "I've never seen that trick before." Yeah. I mean, it was insane how he just took her over and then from within her body, he was able to then create more shine and magic to veer the car off.
Right.
I mean, it was so cool. It was like, I just, like, when that happened, I was just like, I stood up and clapped. I was like so happy about it. I thought it was so neat.
Yeah, it was a really, really good example of how strong he is, and then of course everything at the overlook near the end. So, we could detail every scene that kind of leads up to us getting to the end, but essentially, Dan and Billy and Abra, they work together. As the True Knot is coming for them, they are putting together a plan to, first of all, verify Abra's claims. Billy and Dan, they drive out, they find, with Abra's guidance, based on what she could see, they find the body of the baseball boy. They come back, and they have the very difficult task of trying to convince Abra's father of what is happening, because clearly he thinks Dan is some crazy guy.
Pervert.
Yes, they are able to bring him on board, and then they basically go after the True Knot. They know they're coming. They know they're close. They set their trap, and we have the shootout in the woods, which
was an interesting scene. I don't recall that from the book.
The funny thing is, I didn't either. Again, it's been so long since I've read it. I've forgotten many of the details, but a guy that I work with actually just read the book because he was trying to read it before he saw the movie, and he said that there is a shootout in the book, but it's not nearly as big. It's a much smaller, scene with less people involved, I think is the way he described it. So long story short, they have this kind of action piece where most of the True Knot gets wiped out, including Snakebite Andy, but not before she makes one final push, which was very tragic. Hated to see Billy go. And then ultimately Abra is captured by the Crow, who kind of was on to their ruse from the beginning and was able to abduct her. They have the scene that you just mentioned with Dan kind of ending him. And Rose, the Hat, is watching all this from afar, and she's feeling these, her friends, her family get eliminated one by one. And now she is really upset. She's mad, and she's at, kind of reaching peak potential of her own abilities now too, because she's so angry, and she knows she's going to have to be the one to go out and take care of this situation. She basically juices up on all the steam that she's got left.
She stocks up. Yeah.
And then goes after it. And after Dan is able to get Abra safely back into his, possession, so to speak, they formulate their own plan, and he says, we're going to this place, which of course is the Overlook, because his theory is the Overlook is not going to ignore Rose's ability as well. So
yeah, he said if it's scary for us, it's got to be worse for them.
Right. So we're now reaching to the point where we're going to get to the end, which to me is where this movie really takes its departure, from the novel and becomes its own unique, really awesome story. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what some of the differences were in the director's cut, and why I think there's one scene that I absolutely love that I really wish would have made it into the theatrical version, because it really changes the whole tone of Jack and Dan's conversation at the bar. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come right back and talk about that. All right, so we're back, and we have officially arrived at the Overlook Hotel once again. And I don't know about you, but when they showed that flyover scene over the water with the little island and the car driving up the windy mountain road, and that music starts playing, if that doesn't give you chills, I don't know what does. That was so amazing. And you probably saw this too if you read some of the IMDb trivia. That is the exact same
original footage
from The Shining that they just recolored, kind of grained it up a little bit, and
they degrained it to make it look a little more up to date. they did recolor it, and then they did a day for night, and then it digitally added snow in there because it was snowing. It was winter.
Yes, that whole it's like they knew this was the moment that we've all been waiting for. The
it was
return.
So good, and I legitimately got chills, and I was smiling, and I was so excited to be back at the Overlook. So excited.
Yeah, and they pull up, and you see it, and then of course, Dan goes in, and they recreated so much of that hotel. They said that they rebuilt the sets based on blueprints from the Kubric estate, and it looked good. There's no denying
it. Was amazing. I mean, they had they had set pieces. They had the original typewriter, not the actual, but they had like the exact model. The stair scene. The stair steps were there.
The elevator.
Everything was just, and it was like everything was to scale. It looked so big. It was amazing. But then they had to age a lot of it as well. And they did a great job with that.
Yep.
I thought it was amazing to be walking through it and seeing the hotel come to life again with Danny walking through it, providing its substance to come alive again.
Right.
Oh man, it was so good.
The lights were literally coming on as he was walking through the hallways. Although he
walking the same path as Jack Torrance walking to the Red Room. Right. Oh man,
he does make the pit stop first at the boiler room, which
he does
is of course where everything went wrong in the novel. Not mentioned. I don't know that it was mentioned at all in the movie The Shining about the boiler room, or if they ever go to the boiler room, but that is ultimately...
They did show the boiler room.
Okay.
In The Shining?
Yes.
They did show the boiler room one time.
Okay.
Because Wendy was in there checking on stuff.
Okay. Because I knew in the book, that's the beginning and that's the end. Jack learns of the boiler and how it works, and the guy tells him, watch it, the pressure builds up, it creeps, you have to release the pressure. And then, of course, at the end, it blows up. They kind of, again, it's that perfect mesh of the novel, The Shining, the Dr. Sleep novel, and the Kubrick film. It's all coming together. And then, of course, he's walking through the hotel. It's coming to life around him. And where does he go after he checks out, of course, the bedroom and the bathroom with the door with the axe damage to it, which, of course, is amazing. He goes to the Colorado Lounge. He goes to the restaurant, the bar, and essentially the same scene from The Shining where Jack Torrance sits down and has the drink with Lloyd, the bartender, is recreated here, only now we've got Dan on one side, and the bartender is now Jack Torrance, his father, the soul that the Overlook has been keeping along with all the other ones. And this scene, again, I think I was just smiling like the entire time. Even though it's a sad scene, an emotional scene, it's just still so cool to see it played out the way it was.
Yeah, I was a bit confused at first because he kept calling himself Lloyd. It's like he would not admit that he was, that he was Jack Torrance. So, but Danny didn't have any. He knew who he was talking to because it was visually it was his father. So it was a very, very powerful scene. There was a lot to unpack in those few minutes, and in the original cut, in the theatrical cut, it was maybe 3 to 5 minutes long. It wasn't very long, but they both go through an awful lot in that time. So much so that Danny admits that he has a problem, or they had a problem, and he's overcome it. He's telling his dad, what they did after the Overlook, and now he's he knows why he's there. All while Jack is, trying to push his medicine to him, trying to force him to take a drink, and for Jack, that's the only thing he knows how to do in this version, right? In this version of the scene, it's the only thing he knows how to do. And then he goes into this one little bit about that was like really like it was a sharp cut. Um, he goes into why he appreciates the medicine, talking about how he's got these mouths to feed, and people are just taking everything from him, and he has to provide all of this, everything for his kids and his wife, and they're just eating away at him and his life, and this is the medicine that takes care of it. So it was sort of a sharp cut to Danny, I'm sure. Um, but he holds strong, and as soon as he knocks the drink away, or no, he refuses to drink, Jack knocks it away. Now, you can take over and say, tell us what happens in the director's cut, because that was a part that I didn't get to see, but it brings a completely different tone to that entire scene, right?
It does. The scene that was included in the theatrical version, which you just explained, is basically Jack trying to suck Danny in, take the drink, and also let's admit it, he's going to end up getting consumed by the hotel. That's what they want. They want him. Jack is part of the hotel. It consumed him in The Shining. He's trapped there, and now he's working with the hotel to basically finish what they started and bring Danny in. He knows that drink is the slippery slope that's going to lead to this demise, basically. He justifies his alcoholism, his violence in a way that you can sympathize with, but you're still not going to, approve of, obviously. And Danny stands strong. And when he refuses that drink, Jack has a moment of anger again, and he knocks the tumbler off the bar. And then that's when Abra calls to Dan in his mind and says, "Hey, she's here." And when they cut back, Jack Torrance is gone. Danny has stood his ground. He's won the battle. He's had the confrontation, and it's over. The director's cut extends this in a way that I love, and I wish that they would have included in the theatrical version. And that is, after that glass gets knocked away, there's a cut to a completely different scene where now Jack and Danny are in the bathroom of the restaurant. And Jack is actually wiping Danny's shirt off. And he's like, "Sorry about that, Mr. Torrance," because some of the liquid got on him. And he's apologizing, and he kind of leans in and he makes some sort of comment about how, management's a little uneasy right now. And of course, management in this situation is the Overlook, the spirit, the guiding force of the Overlook. And they have this conversation where Jack almost becomes an ally for Dan. And he's kind of warning him and kind of encouraging him to now get out while he can. He's telling him to leave. He says, the hotel wants the girl. Why are you paying her debt for her? Just bring her in and let what happens. And it's this completely different, sympathetic father-son conversation versus the way the theatrical version ended, which is basically Jack wants Danny to succumb to all this and be with him and be with the hotel, and that's the end. And you get this additional whole different, scene where it's a complete almost 180 where he's trying to help him in the best way that he can in the circumstances, just by trying to convince him, get out of here. This isn't your fight. Move on. Let what happens happen. This isn't for you. And of course, Danny refuses, but I thought it was a really nice moment that I wish they would have included in the real movie.
Yeah, it's almost like, when he was on the bar in front of where, the Overlook could see him in his interaction. At that point, he was just trying to push Danny to the edge in order to get Danny to succumb to the drinking, and then they can take him over. But as soon as he gets behind closed doors, it's like it humanizes him a little bit, and then you get to see where Jack gets to be a father for the first time. This is not something you've seen in The Shining at all, and you didn't get to see it in the theatrical version of Dr. Sleep. And so it's a completely different side of him that, like you said, it makes him feel like a father again. So it's I wish I had gotten to see that. That was interesting. I don't know how it would have really played into the rest of the story, other than just sort of redeeming Jack a little bit.
I think that was all it was meant to do, because there is a small scene at the end of the novel, and I don't remember all the specifics, but because, of course, in the novel, the hotel is gone, they have this kind of climax at this campground, which is where the site of where the Overlook used to stand.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a moment where Danny sees, the spirit of his father, and there's kind of this unspoken, like, I think it's unspoken, look, acknowledgement between them of, kind of burying the hatchet, so to speak. So
terrible analogy, but yeah, I do remember that.
You're right, or perfect. I don't know which one. Again, though, difference between the book and the novel. It's a hatchet, an axe in The Shining, the movie. It's a croquet mallet or a rope mallet
right.
in the book. But anyway, yeah, that was a good scene, and it ends the same way that the bar scene ends in the theatrical version, with Abra calling out to Dan, letting him know that Rose is there, which then leads us into basically the big final battle between Abra and Dan and Rose the Hat in the great room, so to speak, the great hall, I don't know what else you would call it, of the Overlook, where Jack used to sit and pound away on the keyboard during the Shining. So, and that's a scene again where they really, pay homage to the Kubrick film with the staircase and the whole way it was filmed. That was really, really cool.
Yeah, and the way that this was another great scene where we get to see the true strength and power that Danny has, where he's able to suck this very powerful demon. I don't know what else to call them. I mean, they're demons to me. He's able to suck this very powerful demon, being Rose the Hat, into his world, just like he has all of his previous demons, Danny, during his lifetime. And he's able to suck her into his trap that he usually sets for all of these other demons, and that trap happens to be the hedge maze.
Yep.
And so in this hedge maze, he's using Abra. I don't know if Abra was really in there with him, or if he was just conjuring Abra as a trap. I'm not sure about that. But he was basically using Abra as bait to lure Rose the Hat into a direction that he needed her to look in. Almost got her trapped in one of his magic boxes, and that's when Rose the Hat realizes what's going on, and being as powerful she is, she knocks herself out of his head, and brings us back to the hotel. And then from there, things did not go so well for poor old Danny boy.
No. And you talking about, you weren't sure if Abra was actually there in Dan's mind or how that was working. That scene did throw me a little bit. It was almost like the first time I watched the movie Inception, and they kept going down different levels. I got to the point where I was like, I'm not really sure whose mind I'm in right now. What's happening here? But yeah, then they kind of get spit out of Danny's mind, and they're back in reality. They have this battle. Dan's not doing well. He gets severely injured. Rose falls upon him, and then he spawns the ultimate trap with basically, again, I think this is so genius, releasing all of these ghosts and demons that from the Overlook that he's been trapping in these boxes in his mind over the years, and having them just fall upon Rose and destroy her. Yes.
Oh yeah.
That's really cool.
Man, if we back up like 30 seconds though, the scene where she throws an axe into his leg, just like the sharper pointy side of the axe into his leg, and so she throws him down the stairs, and she gets on top of him and starts jabbing a thumb into his leg, and then just that pain of him like losing blood and sort of dying, and then steam comes out of him, and it was like a slightly different color, and she takes it in, and it's just old man steam, a broken man's steam, and she takes it in, and she's like, oh, it's so good, but it tastes like whiskey. I just thought that was so funny. But man, the fact that she could get the steam out of him, and it was still so good out of him as an adult, because he's still so powerful.
Right.
But he has such a lifetime behind his steam now. and she could taste all of that. I thought that was just such a good scene that she could take all of that in. And in that, when she took him in is when she got to see all of his demons. She was like, what's in those boxes? What's in there? Are you in there alone? And it was almost like it was all part of his plan, was to sort of get into that trap where she's right there with him and she can't go anywhere. And then he can release everybody on her. I just thought it was just such an amazing scene. I love that whole thing.
Right. It was really cool to see all those ghosts set upon her. It was cool to see the twins again, because obviously they're iconic along with, you know, the Overlook itself. That was pretty neat. The fact that when they were done with Rose, they turned to him and they said, you know, come play with us, Danny. That amazing. You know, again, it's just so fun to see that stuff again. And you know, you have to be careful with stuff that's so iconic in people's minds when you revisit it or recreate it, because you always run the risk of people, you know, coming out with, why would you mess with something that was already so good? And I didn't feel that with this movie at all. I loved all the set pieces that they brought back. I thought it was all done really, really well. Rose is done. The spirits of the Overlook, they do fall upon Danny. They kind of begin to pull him in, and he goes after Abra. They've kind of turned him. The hotel has turned him, and now he's one of their chess pieces, and he's going after Abra. And they have this confrontation, and you know, and again in a kind of an emotional scene, she's able to reach in and find the real Danny, and you know, ultimately he lets her go, and we have that really sweet moment with Danny back in the boiler room with his mom, and I thought that was a really, really good way to just end the saga of the Torrance family. You know, the fact that it was going to culminate for the three of them at the Overlook, you know, right where it all started, you know, in the beginning. I do wonder why Wendy's spirit was there, because she never died at the Overlook. You know, they left. There's no indication that she ever really had much of a shine. I thought about that after, even though it's a great scene. I don't want to sit here and question it. I did think it was kind of weird that she was there, if it was really her or if it was just a memory that Dan was living in.
I don't think she had to have a shine. Now, keep in mind, you know, Danny says on a number, or at least once in this movie, but that everybody has a little bit of shine. They may not even realize it. But I do think that it was her spirit there. I think it had everything to do with Danny knowing that this was going to be his last moments. And I think he was able to conjure her. He was able to bring her in so that they could be together, so that they could finally look eye to eye for the first time in who knows how long, since he was 6, that they could both look at each other in the eyes and for who they were, right? There was a moment where, you know, I don't know if this was in the theatrical version or not. I think it was only in the director's cut, but he was talking about the last time he used the shine was before his mother died, and it was every time she saw him, every time she would look him in the eye, she would see Jack. So he used his shine to make it so that when she looks in his eyes, she doesn't see Jack anymore. She sees Danny. So that was like, you know, okay, now you can look at me. But then when she was dying, one of his things is he sees flies, is what he was saying. And when she was dying, all he saw all over her entire face was flies, and he couldn't look at her. And I think that has haunted him ever since that happened. He wasn't able to look at her while she was dying. He wanted to comfort her, but he couldn't. So I think in that last scene, it was sort of a nice comfort for both of them to be able to look at each other in the eye and comfort each other during these last moments for the Torrance family, you know, in, well, you know, the place that was the demise for all of them.
Yeah, but I have nothing else to say about that. I think you just explained it perfectly. That was a good analysis of that. And the transition between, you know, the panning left and right, going from adult Dan to Wendy, and then back to it being the child version of Dan. I thought it was a really nice touch as well. So yeah, the Torrance family is done. The Overlook is done. Finally succumbing to the fire the way that Stephen King originally wrote it to die in 1977. And
I was to say, it lives no more in word paper format or
in the film. Yeah, exactly. And then we, Abra is rescued by the police, obviously, because there's a big fire on the mountain at this point. And in the last, we go to the end, which is us seeing Abra back at home with her mom. Her dad has been killed by the True Knot when she was abducted. We forgot to mention that. And she's got Jack, or not Jack, she's got Dan there in a room with her. And it's a very Star Wars-y feel, again, kind of with the whole, like, Yoda and Obi-Wan, the Jedi talking to Luke. The way that Dick talked to Dan, now Dan is there kind of being the mentor and the spiritual guide for Abra. And I thought it was a very sweet ending.
It really was.
And
I enjoyed the way that ended.
Yeah. I don't think anybody was for a second thinking that he somehow survived and he was actually standing there. I think we knew enough about the story at this point to know this is Force Danny, for lack of a better term. So I thought it was a really good ending and a really, really good film. I loved it. And again, after I finally saw it when it came out, I was so bummed that it had such a short life in the theater, because I think a lot of people didn't get to experience it. And it is a really, really good movie. I don't know. Here's one question I want to ask you. Do you think you can appreciate this movie fully if you have never seen or read The Shining?
I've thought about that a lot. And I think, yes, you can probably appreciate the movie for what it was. I think a lot about the movie would feel strange visually because it pays such homage to the way Kubrick shot The Shining. I think Flanagan purposely filmed and shot and edited this thing to feel very much like a sequel to The Shining in such a way that it's not really edited in a way that you would see these days anymore. And that's really just maybe that's nitpicking, but outside of that, I think it was a solid story. There was enough explanation to everything that was going on that I don't think you needed to see. I think the bar scene would have been sort of confusing. The bar scene with he and Jack, Danny and Jack. I don't know. I think you could have appreciated it. Hell, it's been years since I've seen The Shining. So, but I was still going off a lot of memory, but it was still a great film.
I think you could enjoy watching the movie because it's an entertaining film. It's got a lot of good characters. It's got a lot of, action, even though some of it's very gruesome. It's a fun movie to watch. Like, it's an enjoyable, well-made film. I don't think you can really appreciate it as much if you haven't seen or read The Shining, because here's why. If you don't know what the Overlook is, and if you don't know what the Torrance family went through, even on a very generic level, the entire end of the movie doesn't really make any sense. You say, oh, what is this big hotel they're pulling up to? Why does he keep wanting to go back here? Who is this guy at the bar? I think there's a level of knowledge that you have to truly understand the film, which I think is different from enjoying the film.
Mm-hmm. There is a little exposition from Danny about, what the hotel is and what it does to people like he and Abra. So I think there was enough of that to take somebody that's brand new through that story. But you're right. You can enjoy the movie, but you probably can't appreciate it for what it is without seeing The Shining.
And I guess we're wrapping up now. And at the end of our last episode, we were talking about rating, the movie. Do we recommend it? We still haven't quite figured out how we're going to give our full rating or recommendation on the movies that we watch. But I will say this about Dr. Sleep. First and foremost, obviously, I'm a huge Stephen King fan. I've talked about that in forever. I'm a big Mike Flanagan fan at this point. I'm so impressed with his work over the last few years. I've seen just about everything that he's done. I have not seen the movie we talked about earlier. Was it what's it called? Before I Wake. Before I Wake. Yep. I didn't see that one, but I rewatched this director's cut of this, before we filmed this episode. Even I just watched the theatrical version, I think in January. It's March now. I rewatched it with the director's cut, and never once did I get bored. Like I watched this movie for the second time, an even longer version of it, and I still was just captivated by it. I was just watching every scene. I was falling in love with the color and the look and the camera movements and just the acting. I think it's an amazing film, and like I said before, I hate that it didn't get more recognition when it was in the theater, because I think fans of the genre and obviously Stephen King fans, if you didn't get a chance to see it, you need to run out and see it now. Go rent it, go buy it, do whatever. It's a great movie. I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Stanley Kubrick, the way he shot The Shining, was very, very intentional. It had a look and a feel to the way he shot it, with the very intentional movements, the very long pans. The very long pans that go from left to right or right to left. Not just a short pan, not like a pan, but like a very exaggerated pan, and the very exaggerated crossfades between scenes. Even even going down to the heartbeat, during the movies. I'm going to have to paraphrase this, but Mike Flanagan even said something about paying homage to the cinematic language of Stanley Kubrick. And I thought that was such a great line and such a great approach that he took to this film, because in many ways, this doesn't feel like a Mike Flanagan film in the way that it was edited. Yes, it looked amazing visually. It was colored great. But the way it was really the editing style that he chose to go with, being in that cinematic language of Kubrick, was just, it felt so much like a sequel to that movie, that I think I've sort of lost my point of those. I've lost my point in all this rambling. I love the movie and the way it was shot, the way it was that it paid homage to Stanley Kubrick,
which is impressive when you consider that. I mean, 99% of The Shining took place within the walls or the grounds of the Overlook, and probably 85% of this movie takes place elsewhere. He was still able to capture that cinematic language, you say, without being confined to the Overlook, which is, it takes a lot of skill. And again, I think that his writing and directing skill and style, coupled with his cinematographer, that's Michael Feminari, that he's been working with on several projects, they are a dynamic duo that I'm really looking forward to seeing more work from.
Yeah, absolutely. I really agree with you that this is definitely a movie that I would recommend any horror fan to go see. If you're a horror fan and a Stephen King fan, I don't understand why you haven't seen this yet, or why you don't. It's not on your list. It's a really, really great movie.
Yep. I didn't even check to see what the Rotten Tomatoes or the Metacritic score was for this film, but I'm going to tell you right now, it doesn't matter. It's a good movie. It's enjoyable for sure. It's very well made. It's very well acted. I don't have anything negative to say about it at all. Again, if you can watch a 3-hour version of a movie and not get bored and enjoy it, and it's the second time you've watched it, I think that says a lot. So I know last time we said we have 4 thumbs between us. How many thumbs do we want to give this one? I'm giving it 2 thumbs up. How about you?
I'm giving it 2 thumbs up. All right. For sure.
4 thumbs. All the thumbs that we have for this movie.
Every single one.
All right. Anything else that you would like to add?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, guys, this has been a lot of fun. Again, we've been talking about Dr. Sleep. We both really enjoyed it. This has been episode 2 of the Hallowed Horror Podcast, and we will be back next week for a brand new episode. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.